Hey everyone, this is Oscar from Underdog, and today I want you to do a personality test with me. I want you to tell me which type of composer you are. There are two types, and I'm going to introduce you to them right now. But before I do that, I need us to understand the difference between two types of synthesis. It's important that you understand these two types before we talk about the composition types. The first type of synthesis is additive synthesis, and the second type of synthesis is subtractive synthesis. Let me show you in practice. So when we're synthesizing a sound, we're basically creating a sound with frequencies. And frequencies, we see them on a spectrum analyzer like this thing right here. And the absolute building block from zero is always a sine wave, just a single solitary sound like this. And that's just playing one particular frequency. But most sounds have various frequencies, and there's two ways that we can add in more frequencies. One is by simply adding more frequencies. That's called additive synthesis. That would look something like this. I've added in 4 different oscillators, all playing different frequencies. When I hit a note, it looks like this. It's a more interesting sound than a sine wave. Not super interesting, I'll admit that. But you could imagine a synthesizer. There are several synthesizers out there that allow you to add a whole bunch of frequencies and even change those frequencies over time. So you could go from a dark sound to a bright sound to a dark sound just by adding some frequencies and letting those frequencies fade. But a second approach to synthesis, instead of adding in more sine waves, is that we're going to start with a different waveform, which has a lot more going on than just a sine wave. So for example, this sawtooth wave. It's almost like an infinite collection of sine waves stacked on top of one another in different frequency intervals. And then this overwhelmingly bright sound, we're going to cut away in it using a filter. And this idea is then called subtractive synthesis. So this filter here, I can bring down the cutoff, and you can see it getting darker on the spectrum analyzer, brighter on the spectrum analyzer, darker, brighter. And I can automate that filter, of course, to go from dark to bright to dark to make a sound go warm. Just the same way that in additive synthesis, I could have started from a dark sound, added a bunch of frequencies and let those fade again over time. So additive versus subtractive. Does that make sense? If it does, then I can now introduce you to the two main composition types. Let me turn back over that way. All right, so additive synthesis and subtractive synthesis. Now, the two main composition types that I want to introduce you to are additive composition and subtractive composition. Let's think about our composition space, which is the box. High to low frequencies, left to right frequencies, near to far frequencies, and then elements can move inside that box over time, right? If you are composing in an additive way, it's kind of like you're composing in film, for example. You have first a bed of silence. There's a bed of silence, there's nothing. And then you think, okay, what can we add to this? Maybe we'll add a drone to this. Okay, and what else does the scene need? Maybe we'll add a nervous rhythmic sound. Okay, we'll add that. And over time, the drone will fade. And then we'll add some dialogue and then fade other things away. And at every moment, you're asking yourself, what does this composition need in terms of things added to it? Super legitimate way to compose. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Very appropriate in many places. However, in dance music, one tool that I find very helpful is the second way of composing, which is subtractive composition. The idea is that you take that box, the box within which we're creating our music, and you kind of stuff it to the brim with interesting elements until all those interesting elements are playing at the same time. And that represents your song at its most dense, at its most complex moment. And then once you've got all those elements in the box, you're going to create your song by removing elements until only a subset of those elements remains. And over time, they might grow into becoming the dense version of themselves, filling the box. And then afterwards, again, you'll remove elements to create space and then add those elements back to fill it up again. So in a sense, when you're composing in dance music, I feel like you're often first checking how full can you get the box to be at its most impressive moment, and then showing only a part of that or building up to that gradually. And the process of building up to that moment is sort of the song. I was reading this book recently by Adam Savage, Every Tool is a Hammer, and in it he describes his process to manufacturing items. He's a prop builder. He makes props for movies and things like this, right? And he spoke of the type of manufacturing that he does as mostly subtractive manufacturing. He will take a block of wood, for example, and then carve away bits until the item that he needs is left over after the carving. He compares this process to what Michelangelo would say about the sculpting, about you take a block of marble and then you keep removing marble until you liberate the angel. So you set the angel free from the block of marble. That's a subtractive process in that you start with a big or a full thing and then you remove bits until it has the shape of what you need. But in manufacturing, just like in synthesis and just like in arrangement, there's also additive manufacturing. And for example, 3D printing is additive manufacturing. So you start with nothing and then you print exactly the thing that you need. And now there is a third type of action that I think maybe I want you to take home and think about, which I'm still thinking about, and that is that there is also a way of making things by gluing stuff together. Gluing things together that exist is also a very legitimate way of manufacturing. And if I think about programming, for example, when you're coding in software, you're taking one library of software and then taking some other software tool and trying to make them talk to each other, and basically gluing stuff together like this is kind of the same as creating two objects and bolting them together or gluing them together. And my challenge to you would be, is there a musical equivalent of this process? I don't know exactly that there is. I could theorize a few things, but maybe you can let me know in the comments what you think. Also, I'd be curious to know, do you identify more as an additive composer or as a subtractive composer? Are there any pros and cons to those two methods that I've missed? Either way, like the video and drop that in the comments. You often hear me talk about my Foundations Level 1 and Foundations Level 2 courses that I do, and I think I kind of blend the two approaches there, where I'll often start with blankness and then have a system for adding until the box is completely full. Then at that moment, take a moment to technically try to get the mix down right so that at the most dense and most complex part of your song, everything feels professional and in balance. And then from there, work with a subtractive arrangement approach where you start the song close to silence, build up your elements in intensity, but then at the most dense and most climactic part, things are already in balance, because that's the subtractive philosophy that I've applied there by first taking care of the dense part. Does that make sense? I hope this wasn't too overwhelming for you, but I gotta hit you with some philosophy every now and then. It's just my job. Do check out one of these two videos because they were precious thoughts to me and maybe they can help you. Who knows? Who knows? So until next time, stay producing, be good to each other, and take care. Bye-bye.